midst of the Council of Trent. So if you look at that area that is, well, the yellow area of France, all the red area, all the pink area, that was all, formally at least, Roman Catholic territory prior to 1517. And so by 40 years later, it looks like this. That's how much, how quickly that has fallen away. And another reason for that, the quick decline or the quick falling away, is not only you have the examples of moral decadence by some of the clergy, but then you also have pastors and in some places bishops who were the pastors of people, now leading them down this other direction, saying that this is reform, and great amount of confusion continuing on for decades. And it's one of the reasons that it spread that way. So Paul III, he issues this bull in 1542 to call the council. It's rather long, I just have a little excerpt from it here, saying that at the beginning of our pontificate, already perceiving unto what troubled times and unto how many embarrassments in almost all our affairs, our pastoral solicitude and watchfulness were called. We would fain indeed have remedied the evils wherein the Christian commonwealth had been long afflicted and well nigh overwhelmed. But we too, as men compassed with infirmity, felt our strength unequal to take up so heavy a burden. Again, Francis I is vigorously opposing it, but by this time the emperors agreed to it. So with little French representation, the council opens in 1545. And in the first session, they kind of lay out what the purpose of the council is. And we can see that it's for the increase and exaltation of the Christian faith and religion, first. The second, to rid the faith of all heresies, for peace and union of the church, for the reformation of the clergy and Christian people, and for the depression and extinction of the enemies of the Christian name. To decree and declare that the Sacred Council of Trent does begin and has begun. Now that was what happened in the first session, basically state what the intention for the council was, and in the second session in 1546, basically laid out this is how the council fathers are to behave while they are at the council. So refraining from all scandalous behavior, they are expected to be at Mass every day and at prayer and live a simple life and have a simple table, and stating all these things that should seem rather obvious, but I guess they needed to be said at the time. Also, they settled matters on voting rights, who had the right to vote. And for instance, religious orders were given a total of 1 vote per order, not per representative. So that basically the Master of the Dominicans had 1 vote, and the Franciscans had 1 vote, that kind of thing, how they settled that matter. On the third session, they said they were going to explain the faith through that creed, that symbol which had been so helpful to the fathers in addressing heresies of the past. So looking at that with that creed that we prayed at the beginning of our talk tonight, which we have seen back at Nicaea and again at Constantinople I in 381. The creed, going from doctrine, explanation of doctrine, in response to all heresies, all challenges to the faith. And so that's basically a confirmation of all the councils that came before and stating it that way. So as of up to here, the third session, there's not really anything new other than laying out how they're going to proceed in responding to the challenges. That the writings of Luther and then the writings of Calvin, they're also present here, and Zwingli and some of the other lesser so-called reformers present. The fourth session is where we start to see some actual things being passed that they're not new, but if we're looking at in the history of the council, this is the first time we see them appear. So the first is the decree on the canon of Scripture. So if the council is going to attempt to restore unity in the understanding of the faith, there has to be what are the sources by which it's going to respond, right? There's the creed, which we saw in the third council, but sacred Scripture is at the heart of all theology, the heart of the life of the church. With Martin Luther and Calvin, there is a question of exactly what is contained. Okay, you say the Bible, sacred Scripture, but what do you mean when you say that? One of the effects of the Renaissance and the growth, one of the effects of the Renaissance in Northern Europe was a recovery of the sources, right? So that's true in Italy, true up in Northern Europe, and it also was a recovery of the sources of Scripture itself. So looking back about the Hebrew text, the Greek text, and all these, looking back at the texts themselves and not translations of them. And so some members of the church started questioning whether Old Testament books that were not in Hebrew, or there were no copies of in the Hebrew Masoretic text, whether those should actually be in the Christian Bible or not. That was the debate. Now, the oldest Masoretic text is from the year 1000. The oldest Greek text is at least 700, 800, 900 years older than that. So there are good arguments that could be made for why the church used and continued to use some of those, what became known in the Catholic Church as deuterocanonical. And Protestants started to call them apocryphal books. And so at the fourth session, the canon of Scripture was formally defined. Now, in local councils, this had happened centuries before. So back at the Council of Carthage, St. Augustine's time, 397, the same list we can find it back there. But this is the first time at an ecumenical council it was brought up. So those books of the Bible, 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And then you have the historical books listed, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd. Now, the way this older translation of the Proceedings from the Council of Trent has it, first 4 books of Kings, which are basically 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Older things, sometimes you'll see it 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kings. Then the 2 books of Chronicles, or what we know as Chronicles, the book of Ezra, the book of Nehemiah, and then a Tobit and Judith, which are 2 of those works that only appear in Greek, that we don't have a Hebrew copy of. Esther, part of Esther is only found in Greek. The book of Job. Then the Davidic Psalter, 150 of those Psalms. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Canticle of Canticles, Wisdom, Ecclesiasticus, or sometimes that's known as Sirach. The book of Sirach, that's another one, along with Wisdom, that's not accepted by Protestants. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Baruch, that's a further one that's not accepted by Protestants. Ezekiel, Daniel, and the 12 minor prophets. And then ending there, there's the 2 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Those also not accepted by Protestants. So that decree on the, and then the New Testament, there's no debate of the Protestants, aside from Martin Luther's offhanded comment that the Epistle of James is a letter of straw. He seemingly wanted to get rid of that. He never did so. Yeah.
I heard he also wanted to get rid of Revelation. He felt that belonged to, that was kind of set aside in some way.
It could be. I'm not that well versed on everything Luther read or said or did, so that could very well have been. He certainly thought the heart of the New Testament was his understanding of St. Paul and Romans, and that was the kernel of how the key to understanding